My name is Maria. I'm 68. I live in New York City, and I was born in Spain. We lived in a small village in Galicia, and we were working class poor. My father worked for the National Railroad, Renfe, and my mother did sewing and embroidery to make a little extra money. And when I was 9, my grandfather brought us to the United States. It was the mid-60s, 66 maybe. The United States had a brief opening for immigrants to be able to come here if you had family members that could take you in and set you up. So for that brief period, we came here and arrived in Newark, New Jersey, and the Ironbound section, which was an immigrant area of New York, and the Newark riots were going on at the time. I remember. So I finished grammar school here, then high school. I did partly here and partly in Madrid. And then I was going to study journalism in Madrid, but the fascists kept attacking the journalism school every other day. So I came back to New York, and my parents still lived in New York. And I got my journalism degree from NYU. And after school, I was a reporter, sort of a travel writer for travel trade magazines for several years. And then I went into advertising, copywriting, and book editing. And I did some professional singing as well, which I still do. And I'm still working, what I call for the devil, kind of in advertising. I'm still doing that. In Spain, well, I think it's conscious political. It was when I went back to Spain at 16, perhaps, to Madrid to study there. And that's, I would see all these A's in circles, in the subways and whatever. And the regime always had stories about how anarchists were going to kill your children and this and that. And so I was very afraid of the anarchists, of course. And then, so it started because I made friends with a man who taught philosophy at high school level. And he just, was like the education of a life, that movie about, you wouldn't know. But in any case, he taught me about communism and socialism and anarchism. And I was taken to meetings of the communists underground, of course, and was able to talk to them. And then I noticed that they didn't really answer your questions other than sending you back to what Marx said, and just like Marx was God or something. And so when I noticed that when I asked questions, but and they would say, you're being a reactionary, that's so on and so forth. So I'm like, okay, that's not my thing. And then with the real light came in when I attended a meeting of the anarchists in northern Spain in a wine cellar, and anarchists from France snuck into Spain and were there. And that was when I knew I was home, because they talked about revolution. They were very serious, but at the same time, they had a good time, and they didn't, quote anybody. They were real revolutionaries, and they were talking about, what can we do? What are we going to do? And let's have some cookie. It was very very hopeful, but they were very, you knew they were going to do something. They weren't just going to sit around and talk politics and quote Bakunin or whatever. So that's when I learned anarchism has nothing to do with what you hear about in the press. Even in the United States, people don't know what it is. They don't know what communism is or socialism either. They don't know anything here. So yes, and so I became, I joined the CNT, and I was 17, 18, and I was militante. I just participated in the demonstrations, which were very happy, and helped silkscreen posters and put them up at night, and sing to make money for strikers and people in jail and that sort of thing. And I remember there was a big concert by a well-known person in Madrid to raise funds for prisoners and strikers, and the government shut it down. So a friend of mine and we both had our guitars, and some people followed us to the park, and we got some money that way. And then the police were coming, so we gave them the money and switched over to the Spanish folk music, and so those are the kind of things. And CNT at that time had the headquarters of the CNT and the communists and possibly the socialists. I don't know how that happened, but we were all on Calle Libertad, Freedom Street, which is so interesting, an old section of Madrid. And then Franco died in 1975, I believe. And maybe the next year after that, the unions, the underground unions, the commies and the socialists came up out of underground and joined the government. I don't remember, but there was something, you came up out of the underground and you kind of joined something that had to do with the government coordinating all the unions. And the CNT didn't want to join anything to do with the government. So Gomez Casas kind of led a press conference. I was in there saying, we're out of the underground, etc., but we're not going to be joining all the other unions in this thing. And then right away, almost, there was a huge schism, which you probably read more about than I do at this point, remember. But pretty quickly, an alternate CNT came out, a CGT, and I still don't quite get what that was all about. I do remember that at the press conference, there was this man, Leon, who was very, very gung-ho in the CNT up until that point. And then it turned out he was, all this time, he was a collaborator. He was there gathering information for the government. So I know we went after him, but he ended up in France somewhere. So there was a lot going on that when you're, 17, 18, you don't really know what's going on. So, and then, so I came back to the US to study journalism, and my contact in the U.S. were Sam and Esther Dolgoff here in New York, and became good friends with them. And I became one of the editors of the News from Libertarian Spain with Sam and Sidney Solomon, Abe Bluestein, Gabriel Javsikas. And they died eventually, and I sent full copy of this to Labadie. And and then I continued being somewhat active. There wasn't much in the U.S. that you could do compared to Spain or anywhere in Europe, but there was the Libertarian Book Club, which was run by basically European and Jewish anarchists, immigrants, for several years. And then kind of our new generation at the time took over for the old folks. And then that went on for several years, and we had talks I don't know if it was every week or once a month. And then what else did I do? Oh, and then more recently, there wasn't much to be done. It was kind of depressing for someone coming away from a country where things were really going on. And then, I think after that, wasn't much. Oh, I was asked to write a chapter on Mujeres Libres, free women. When I was in Spain, Mujeres Libres, which was a CNT women, created a women's section or whatever you want to call it. So I wrote a chapter on the history of Mujeres Libres and how we're not like feminists and how we're different and being anarchists and so on. And then that was it for a while. There wasn't much happening. And then around 16, 17, I worked with an organization of labor organizers called Brand Workers, but they were they work very closely with the IWW here in New York, and so I translated between. We're talking undocumented workers who were working some up to 80 hours a week with no sick days, very low pay, very exploited. So brand workers and the IWW organized them, and I helped with that effort and press conferences, translation with the lawyers. And they won some cases with the National Labor Relations Board. And that's it. And then I joined, this group, the Sam and Esther Dolgoff Institute, which is just basically we have discussions, and once a month we have a speaker. They just didn't seem to be able to think for themselves. They had the theory as their sort of Bible, even though they are well-intentioned, like we anarchists are. They seem to truly believe that, particularly the communists, to truly believe that dictatorship is necessary. And of course, once you're there, you're not going to leave. So that was a part of it. And well, it was at the First International made it pretty clear. And I'm not a theoretician at all, but I do remember that it was Bakunin versus Marx. And they believed, what I just said, you must have a dictatorship of a proletariat to educate the dumb people. And Bakunin, obviously, well, and the ends justify the means is kind of what the Marxists were talking about there. And the anarchists are more idealistic, but also it's idealistic, but it also works better, because the interesting thing about anarchism is sort of the concept of adherence to the unenforceable. We don't make people think a certain way or, punish them if they don't. However, that creates within people the freedom to trust in our principles. And they do make sense. It's hard to explain it, but in Spain, I believe the CNT grew so strong because of education. So it's education versus dictatorship. So the CNT in the early part of 1910 or whenever that was, really early on, they already had, what we call Ateneos Libertarios, libertarian centers, where we're open for free to anyone, learn how to read, learn all kinds of things. And they were free and open. And it took, how many decades that was, but people really understood what it means to be in a true democracy. So your responsibilities to everybody else in the community. And that was, that was a part of people's thinking. So anarchists know that you need to show up for things and be organized, but you don't expect, that you have to follow anyone necessarily. And also during plenums, I don't know what that's called. where everybody in a certain district gets together to vote on things, right? You voted, but everybody was allowed to say whatever they needed to say. And then at the end, we all voted, and when there was a minority, you were respected. You could not do, just you knew better. You were, as an anarchist, you have a responsibility to the whole. So even if you disagree, not to go against, against what's being decided, but you can do your own thing too. You can do direct action, etc. So that's what I mean. I think in general, it's a philosophy as well. To me, it's always been more of a philosophy than a political movement, really. Also, when we elect someone on any level, the anarchists, if you truly do get your marching orders from the group, from the community, or whatever you want to call it, and if you stray from that, you can taken out of their position. If they've been there 1 month, doesn't matter, and you elect someone else, right? So, and these other parties, and certainly the communists, they're just there forever, basically. But even in the United States and everywhere else, it's a 5-year term, it's a 4-year term. You're stuck with these people. So that was another thing, and also just the concept of solidarity, of humanity, from each according to his ability, to each according to her need. And I think it takes a really mature human being to be able to capture that and to be a good anarchist in that sense, because there is no enforcement, and you really have to understand those principles, and then they work. People come out and do what they need to do. And one other thing I just wanted to add is the anarchists. The anarchists don't idealize people. Not their theoreticians, not anybody. That's the whole thing. Like we're all on the same level. So question authority is the thing, right? And I think, and in that way, we can, apply our principles without, oh, we don't want to piss this one off. He's my hero, or, it's just very pure democracy. I know maybe everywhere, but I know for a fact, even particularly in the United States, it can be, and it should be, if there were more of us and we were more organized, it would be to teach the anarchist principles. However, do not say the word anarchism to anybody. Like, don't say this is an anarchist principle, because that obviously, even if you just say socialist, you're out. So it would just, and that's really what it is, because I know some anarchists really, we've had discussions, really want to say we are anarchists and this is what we believe in and do what we think, da-da-da. As soon as you say anarchists, they're out, they're gone. So, and as anarchists, we don't need to be adored or, oh, they're so good, these anarchists. It doesn't matter. The principles are the thing. And to teach people these principles that we've been talking about, to not be afraid to question what's being done, to just believe. Well, I'll talk about the U.S. here. It applies to anywhere. I think people in the U.S., we've always seemed to have had a very low voting rate, even for national elections, not even 50%. So I think the thing is just people just don't believe in, the government, or, in a sense, they're just not activated by anything. So I suppose that's a good question. I haven't really, I don't have a great answer. I guess it would be, I behave myself personally like an anarchist, and I speak up and I express, why do we have to, why do they have to be there for 4 years if they're screwing? Without saying we got to take them down, the anarchists, we need to organize a revolution, like go ahead, scare everybody, and they'll do nothing. So I think in the first place, anarchism is a personal philosophy. I behave the way that I believe, and people may ask me some questions and maybe open some minds. As a group, if we had groups, I think we could somehow, organize somehow to help people, to educate people like the CNT did, without shoving anything down anybody's throats, and without, like I say, don't state you're an anarchist, but just teach people how to think for themselves, and to be critical of advertising, of political ads, of what politicians are saying, just to make them more aware, to examine what people do and say, examine their motives, like where are they coming from, why are they saying that, is that based on fact, etc. And just to educate, basically, to whatever you read or hear, to educate them on, especially now with the internet, to question things, to think for yourself. So I think education is the key, but without scaring people. Don't tell people about it. They don't need. It doesn't matter whether it's an anarchist point of view or not. What matters is if it could help people liberate their minds and change what's going on. It's complicated because it's not just right wing because it's right wing. I mean, it's what's going on, I think, here, and is that these disenfranchised, poor working class people, I think the Democrats, who used to be for the poor and et cetera, working class, haven't been, and dropped the ball. And then these people have been suffering, particularly in the Midwest, when their jobs are taken away, et cetera. So they've been ripe for, a dictator type to come in and say, I have the answers, America again, da, da, da. So I don't think they are, I guess what I'm saying, they're not consciously right wing. They're just sick of it. They're sick of their lives and nobody paying any attention. So this man comes along, and they know him from TV. He was a millionaire, and he fired people and he hired people, and that's what we want. Yeah, whatever. I think that's my theory. Then the other, and plus, he's channeling their anger, their frustration and their anger. So to counter it, like I was struggling with before, I had this. We could create media pieces that, as a writer and as an advertising person, we could do that. That's something, without saying, Socialist Party or the anarchists, nothing. Just make up a name that sounds kind of fun, maybe, and write stuff. You know what? Yeah, we could counter some of this by putting stuff online, not necessarily on the Salmon Esther Institute, because they'll know what that's, an anarchist. But but younger members of younger anarchists, that would be actually a really great thing. I'm thinking to create some channels, some platforms, some social media platforms, and write, about. Challenge these things and give them some real information, to counter it, and to do it in a way that that appeals to them, that's simple, but really shows them, well, there's a way out. There's a better way out. Look at, okay, you believe he said this, and he promised that, and yada yada, and just expose the lies. Just say, oh. Not necessarily, oh, he's a liar, but just say, Trump says da 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 da, and then like some, some imagery, fun stuff, that'll draw them in, and then say, well, and 2 years ago he did this, and he took away that, and he's and I don't know, something along those lines. I think we do have a role, actually. I think it seems like media is everything now, and people are going to the wrong places, and without being didactic or, educational, but just put as much out there as we can in order to counteract, because they're all over the place now. That's all you see these days. So that's something we could do. I think start with education on whatever levels, you can, on social media, certainly. And maybe we could publish some pamphlets and just get our views out there. But, I'm thinking the United States is so different, from Europe. I don't know that it's a great idea to have a socialist party and a communist party and the anarchists necessarily. It's just such a different place. And it could just be, I don't know, for the US, our movement could be never an anarchist movement. It could just be something called something else, but that draws heavily on our principles of true grassroots democracy, of recall, of leaders, so to speak, representatives is what they really are, right? And so on. And maybe in the US, it's never going to take, to be anarchist or communist. And it doesn't have to. It really, I don't care. I mean, a lot of anarchists disagree, of course, but I don't think it matters. I think what matters is, maybe the US needs to create its own brand of, left wing, or not, I call it anything, just groups, a national organization of people who question authority and who organize from the bottom up and who feel responsible for the entire community, all the principles that we talked about before, but without it necessarily being an anarchist movement. I don't think the U.S. is I don't think we're needed necessarily. The principles are needed, but why does it have to be the anarchists, or the communists, whatever? The important thing is these are ideas and tactics that work, and if it could happen here and get a strong enough movement, that's all you need. You can call it my mom's recipe for freedom. It doesn't matter, you know what I mean? But I do think we need to get out there more. And I think, like other people, like most people, that don't vote very much and so on, we anarchists, or me particularly, I know, I'm just kind of down on this whole. There's no organization. There's nobody moving around or doing much. Having come from Spain, it's just really kind of depressing over here. So, but your questions are good, and particularly with this man, in the White House, who we know, I feel he's not going to leave after 4 years. He's going to do whatever he can. He's got, the courts and the Supreme Court, he's not leaving. So I think we do need to snap out of our stupor here and start. In my case, I'm a writer, so start writing stuff, start collaborating with, younger anarchists that know about how to disseminate stuff, and do more. Maybe, we could have a demonstration. We got a little table and disseminate some stuff, not the old traditional stuff necessarily, but something to counter. Because the last thing I'll say here is, because this is what's going on here is not just right, left, etc. This is fascism. And the people who believe Trump, the MAGA people, they're not evil or anything. They're just like in Spain and Germany, they're brainwashed. It's not rational. They're not being rational. I've tried to have conversations, and they're not able to. There's no give and take. It's like, well, no, he said, and make America great again and lock her up. There's no. So this is how fascism takes over. It's people that are not rational. It's a brainwashing. You're not able to have conversations or educate them or anything. But the more we put out with our point of view, the better, because people will read something different.